Hi, everyone. I would love to introduce San Qing. He's an ordained priest and 66th generation lineage holder and 126th generation lineage holder of Taoism. He's also a Taoist Master of Qigong and Neigong and is a prolific channel and healer. Welcome, Sam.
Well, thank you, Sima. I'm so grateful to be here. And I've been looking forward to this conversation. So it's another day in paradise, I think, for both of us.
Yeah, I agree. I'm really glad you connected because a lot of the topics, I saw some of the topics that you're exploring on your channel, there is a lot of crossover with what I try to research and explore through this channel. So
yeah, it's an interesting place. This the interweb and your ability to basically share ideas and create different viewpoints of reality by having conversations like this one.
Yeah, I'm really interested in your journey, like how you got started and why you were drawn to Taoism, because I would love to and once we learn more about your journey, I would love to hear more about Taoism through your perspective.
Yeah, it's so funny. We always speak on the insight of the Tao, and realizing to truly embody the Tao is to lead from behind when you're sharing the messaging of the Tao to others. And so it's always humbling and I'm very grateful when someone asks me, well, how did all this get started? Because it's an interesting journey when human beings are given a reality check, because you're getting a crossover right now today where people talk about the word consciousness, and it bleeds into so many aspects, from neurology, psychology, physics, science. Now you're looking at things that are having so many different value points for the individual, and when you can validate it, then it becomes a really powerful moment for you as a seeker. So it started many years ago when I was a young boy, and I experienced an out-of-body experience, or a near-death experience, that led me on this journey where I started focusing on the physical aspect of being human. And at a very young age, at the age of 10, I discovered bodybuilding and powerlifting, and I got heavily involved in that from 10. And by the time I got to like 19 or 20, there was something in my mind that was saying that you need to look for something greater. And took me on a path of discovering this thing we call meditation. And when that happened, it was a pretty much a fast forward, profound revelation after revelation within the moments, within literally days. Because transitioning from a mindset where I was very much in the material, tangible world of picking things up and crushing them, and then I had this voice in my head saying, you need to go and find this meditation. And at the time, meditation was it was related to people that are yogis, Hare Krishnas. I mean, there was very little understanding as the East started to bleed into the West. And so I've discovered a meditation class that was being offered, and I really didn't have a true understanding of what that meant. It was like silence, stillness, something of that, create the mind stillness. In any case, I went to the actual class, and I was already in the mindset of being defeatist. And when I got there, it was in this small little rec center in the middle of some sort of ghetto. It was a freebie from a grandmaster who was offering these free classes. And I was like, something's telling me I need to check this out. So by the time I got there, it was pretty damning, like the idea of moving from my car to the actual center itself without getting stabbed or killed, which was interesting. It was sobering. So when I got into the rec center, I sat down, I attempted to sit down and put myself in a lotus position. I couldn't. I was a big gorilla. And I was looking around the room, and all these people are sort of beggars like myself looking for something, trying to get an understanding. And what happened was this Grand Master, basically, she said, listen, I want you to listen to my voice. And I'm thinking, my back aches. I can't sit in this thing called lotus position. I can't obtain this stillness that they're looking for. I'm hearing all these noises in the background, literally dogs barking, people screaming. It was pretty basically mind-boggling. And so I sat there, and she was like, now I want you to focus on my voice. And when I continue to speak, everything will fall away. And I was thinking in my mind, there's no way this is going to happen. I'm frustrated right now. I've wasted my time. I've come in here. I've got all this noise. I'm trying to do this thing. I can't do it. It's definitely not me. And I kid you not, Simran, the second she finished saying, listen to my voice and everything will fall away, it became mind-boggling to me, because I looked at her with my eyes open, and it went from noise to complete silence. And she was just like, and this went on for 5 or 10 minutes. And I was astounded. I'd never accessed this level of awareness or ability to create something that was outside of the physical world. And this is the first time I ever had access to a meditative state. I was blown away, and of course hooked. And that took me on a path of, within the same week, I channeled for the first time. I directly channeled my teacher, Latsu, that I still have today. And it then drew me to this desire to focus on Taoism, because Taoism was the center point of the direct communication I had with Latsu. Now, I walked into a channel class only a few days after that meditation event, and the channeling teacher had spent 60 years consciously cultivating channeling. I walked in, and in the same breath channeled Latsu, and he literally had a stroke and was like, hang on a second, how is that possible that you can access this information? And I've been doing this 60 years, and you just look like an overgrown gorilla that has you don't even understand what it is. And so the reason that I bring this up is because from a Taoist perspective, when you're on a journey for your seeking to knowing what we call the mother, you have to understand that the highest level of ascension is direct source information. Every Taoist canon throughout history, and there are so many, there are thousands, have always resorted back to the individual's journey in self-realization and being able to access that high frequency that gives them and reveals to them the true nature of reality for a Taoist. And it comes back to returning to this state, this very moment. And so I directly started channeling. From the channeling, within a few days, I witnessed the physical healing, which I attributed to myself remembering who I am. And I mean, on this channel, we can talk about, incarnation, reincarnation, if that's a flavor or something that wants to be identified within the journey, that sort of integrating a deeper understanding of, well, if that's possible, how do you verify what that really means to the individual seeker? And so you cannot make it more sobering when you obtain information that would seem impossible. So to a lot of my friends that are physicists or scientists, precognition, non-centric, non-dualist sort of like perspectives, you start getting into deeper, mathematical sums that acquire what reality really means from all these different viewpoints. And so from there, I witnessed a physical healing literally 2 or 3 days later, where this woman had gangrenous flesh. It returned back to pink in color in about 40 minutes before my very eyes. And I'm just like, okay, this is one punch after another. And then the messaging is, you must go on your path to acquire, this insight and remember who you are. And that drew me to training and practicing, and ultimately ending up in China and being ordained as a priest. This is, you can't make this stuff up, because there's nothing more sobering than when you go from something that is so completely polar opposite to where you are right now. Like, I would never have assumed as a young boy that was really sort of raised with the idea that, you can believe in what you want, but generally speaking, what are you, an atheist, perhaps, maybe? And so to go from that to deep understanding of a religious practice, not just a concept that comes meets with a metaphysics sort of understanding, because Taoism is philosophy, right? Most people just assume it as philosophy, and it's coming from that point of some charming poetry within a little book they call the Taoist Ching, and it ends there. And then go, oh, well, that's I can kind of wrap my mind around the idea, but I can't understand how that is really possible, because it's talking about something that relates to inaction and the ability to just not do anything to create something. And that is mind-boggling for most people, especially in this lifetime, that's just not possible. No. If you talk to any sort of materialist or right now new age spiritual mentor, manifester, they're going to say, you need to act upon what it is that you're doing. And I can tell you, when you obtain what we call the Wu Ji, which leads you to Wu Wei, everything is effortless, everything is seamless, everything is serendipitous, everything is synchronistic. You just can't believe how easy the flow is. And so looking at today's age and how we're fundamentally conflicted, because society is pushing us in a direction where we're not going to look at the old rituals that come from ancient practices that are deeply seated in history. Everyone needs to be separate. Everyone needs to not remember, the idea and the sacred relationship that you have with, a source, universe, God, Buddha, Tao. There was just this need to just chip away. And what happens is you get caught up in, the material state of what someone might perceive as a 3D reality. And you're forever chasing that, spiritual dragon, I like to call it. When you have a glimpse, you sort of become misaligned, and then you realign yourself when you have these epiphanies where someone has an OBE, an NDE, some type of like paranormal or supernatural experience that they cannot understand. And so, you get to a point where you can't help but ask the question. And what we call the seeker is now created this desire to find more, to discover more. And ultimately, you have to develop these skills for yourself. This has all got to do with self-realized truth. And so many people just, they can't, that's too much for them. And that's why there's always Taoism sounds like a great idea, I'll just leave it there, because it's a little obscurely action equals action. And that's really, we fundamentally talk more and more about what is the construct of this reality? What is it founded on? How does it make it validated for the seeker? Self-realization or truth is really the individual's moment. It's a subjective thing that can only be realized by you, yet we return to the same, fabric as, a physicist might, acquire this whole idea of, the theory of, reality as being, a quantum model where, you're looking at something they call, 0 point energy that is obtained through an entanglement that is theoretical to so many people, but you can get into deep practices of a state of awareness where you can actually validate these things through, remote viewing, precognition, things that are measured by people that would be a little bit more skeptical, but within a parapsychologist sort of viewpoint, you can start to nurture some of these ideas and validate them for yourself through specific practices that enter into what we call the mind, and we don't separate, from the intellect or the intuitive. You're looking for that center point, that vesica point, which we call Wuji. I don't know whether I'm answering the questions correctly, or maybe I need to take a breather. Does that help you at all?
Absolutely. I'm so fascinated by hearing your journey and the fact that you came from a very different background, started meditation and discovered Taoism and stuck with it for over 30 years now. That says a lot about how much committed you are to this path, and how much it has benefited you because 30 years is a lot. It's not
consciously, yeah. No, it is a lot. It's so you attribute it to certain lens of how you perceive reality, and we can get down to conscious and unconscious process, and digging in the weeds of, well, how are you looking at your life? Is it half empty or half full? The glass, what are you looking at? And I always suggest and promote the idea that once you gravitate to something, whatever it is that you find in your heart, you must explore it. I mean, from an epigenetics perspective, we're made up of numbers, letters, words, symbols. They're all integrated at a subatomic level that you can reveal through the DNA that there's messaging going on here that's making you emotional, making you have this visceral experience, just like the chill that you just got right now. It's like this chill, that chill again. It's all coming from that, what we would call biofield, energetic potential. This is a union. We're coming together and realizing that we're not separate. We're actually one.
And that I'm very interested in learning about how the self-realization unfolded for you, because it opens up differently for everyone. There are so many different flavors of awakening. In your case, did that glimpse happen like in a snap?
Well, yeah, it literally happened. Like as I just mentioned to you, I went from meditating for the first time and stopping time and space and literally entering a void where I'm now the tapestry of what within Taoism we call the mother, which is perfection. And you're literally the puppet master. You're entering that space and able to put your attention, intention in any direction and alter what is in front of you at will. That's just unreal. Like that was my first encounter. And then it moved to channeling, direct source channeling. So channeling is an interesting thing. Depends on where your energetic potential is. but everyone has it. Everyone has the ability to awaken the inner architecture of your energetic potential. That's why I teach people Neigong, which means internal power, which is related to Nidan, which means internal alchemy. And so once you start playing with that energetic potential, once you have been self-realized, you're able to now tap into that tapestry and alter what someone would perceive as the 3D reality at will. And that is sort of the seeker to realize the immortality, the eternal like flame that burns inside you that is beyond the flesh, that you realize that what is spiritual consciousness? Consciousness in of itself is this now moment. You're absent of any place, person, or thing. You're just now. And for that to take place, you have to be able to validate it through energetic potential. It's all conceptual. It's all psychological. It's all transitory. It's not of a state that an individual can validate. And that's where you must move it into this dualistic sort of electromagnetic potential, so that you can actually not think you're having a psychotic episode. You're actually experiencing something that you can validate for yourself, which is really the concerning part for most people. They get involved on this path and they want to see more. They want to experience more. This seems to be the very core of all new spiritual, new age sort of spiritual seekers. But yeah, it went from never meditating to this instant ability to access and stop space and time to all of a sudden the following day channeling. And that's really the highest level of ascension. So, conceptually, we talk about incarnation, reincarnation, and for many, it's a choice, whether you believe it or not. That's the whole purpose of your own journey, is to decipher what that really means to you. I generally, from a Taoist seeker throughout the history of Taoism and Chinese history, channeling is the highest level of ascension, which would be equivalent to someone talking about let's see, Akashic records, halls of Amenti, this ability to potentially access psychic abilities, mediumship, these types of things that are thrown around a lot these days, are exciting with a contemplation, yet realized by few and mastered by even less than that, because you have to struggle with the human mind. And that's where people get bound by their belief systems. And their belief systems are really what will choke the idea or the potential of completely accessing everything at once, because you get these fundamental belief systems that stick you in the weeds that you can't step around. And so channeling Lao-Tzu, experiencing the physical healing, which I experience on a daily basis, it's wild. I have yet to have a day that I won't experience something. And if you can give me a scenario, I've probably seen it in my lifetime, because it's just it's part of what we call within Taoism the return. And that return, first you must remember. When you remember, you realize that knowing is this present moment, which is what we call the Wu Ji. So the Wu Ji is that stillness between the breath in and the breath out. So from a Taoist perspective, everything, and this is so funny because more recently there is a physicist that I like listening to. His name is Nassim Haramein. Now he calls himself a self-realized physicist. He came from nothing. He has developed a skill that I think is finally validated. He may have a PhD, he may not, but he brings together the receipts and the numbers to validate his theories, and he's starting to accumulate that more and more. But when he talks about his relationship with the universe and his unified field theory, is literally the self-evidence of what Taoists have been talking about before you can even think about a level of a timeline. And so this has so deeply a relationship with understanding everything is contracting and expanding. So if you take that, and Taoists look at life as a bellows, that you are contracting and expanding at the same time. You're all things and nothing at the same time. And right there, you start there and someone's head blows off, and then they're like, okay, that makes no sense to me. And then you basically break it down into micros, to the simplicity of breath. And breath in of itself, you obtain every access that you could possibly imagine to anything through the breath. And so we talk about yin and yang, which is the breath in and the breath out. And the center point of that is the wu ji. It's when you pause and you are not breathing in or out. This is where we gather what we call the absorption of the riches. You absorb the riches, which is the chi energy, but that particular energetic potential is not from the electromagnetic spectrum. So now you start getting into, well, what is it? I mean, chi is perfection. It's not just life force energy; it's perfection. So measured on a frequential sort of like state is completely different to, brain waves in general, which is if you've heard of Stephen Hawking's consciousness scale, have you ever heard of that? So, it relates to frequency, right? And what I find interesting is, even at 1,000 hertz or 963.
I think it's Richard Hawkins. Is it?
It's what? What is?
It's Richard Hawkins or?
Oh yeah, no. Is it Stephen Hawkins? I think it's Stephen, or maybe it's Richard. I'm not sure. But
yeah,
we're
but
familiar
I know the scale that.
Yeah, you're familiar with the scale. So, when you look at that and then you start measuring emotions with a certain frequency, I can tell you right now, I've been measuring my brain waves for years, that between anything over 40 hertz, which is a gamma brainwave, I normally witness with my own eyes. I'm an observer witnessing a physical healing at between 100 and 400 hertz. Now, that is just a measurable unit that you can now quantify what it is that you're experiencing, right down to a Planck unit, where we're now taking larger, bigger chunks of just the now moment, right down to a subatomic particle. You can start to put these pieces together to validate it for yourself. But, he mentions 963, which, I can appreciate that. And a lot of people tend to talk about these frequencies getting higher and higher and higher as the collective gets higher and higher and higher. And I mean, it sounds really good in theory, but you have to be able to observe it yourself. Like Schumann resonance, which is something that is quite familiar for most people probably listening to your listening audience, this frequency of the earth. And that can be validated by the individual. If you don't have what we call the personality, if you're not overshadowed by that, and you're able to just access that now moment, it's about 7.83 hertz, which is right there within, an alpha theta sort of state of mind, which makes you potentially mastering your conscious and unconscious process. Then you have I've had a lot of scientists that read Schumann resonance, and they're talking about a foreign frequency that goes upward of 12 to 18 hertz. Some other outside influence is obstructing the frequency of the earth. Now, what does that mean? It would collectively mean probably the state of the world stage right now, and people in doubt and in fear and all these things that are catalysts for their own reality. And that would collectively raise it to that level. And that is presented by, potential financial, collapse and World War III and all this politics stuff. It presents, and you join this collective, even though most people think, oh, what I think doesn't really matter. Oh, well, of course it really does. I mean, if you understand that you can create, from a psychologist's perspective, a psychodynamic loop with an individual in a few moments by mimicking, using mirror neurons and mimicking their state of awareness, their emotional state, you can enter that through the respiration, the breath. You can mimic someone's breath if you're an observer and instantly access the psychodynamic loop, which then creates what we call rapport. So all of a sudden you have rapport with someone that, you know, you wouldn't have had 5 minutes ago, but that energetic potential now leads you to creating this oscillating effect between the two individuals as one unit. So getting into, once I accessed Latsu, once I accessed that, and I started pursuing my training, everywhere I looked was a yin and yang symbol. It was like, it was a decipher. Like I could not escape it. It didn't matter, eyes open, eyes closed, I would see this yin and yang symbol that would identify me coming home. And I remember the first time in China, I remember specifically what it was like. Latsu presented himself instantly to me, and with my eyes open, and this is generally how I interact with this sort of relationship I have with my channels. And when I'm channeling energy, for the audience, it's like my dialogue with another source of information that leads me back to a monologue, which is the very now moment. And so you have to start to refine that with an energetic potential, because it becomes misplaced and you become deluded because you can't validate it for yourself. So you become very frustrated as a seeker if there's no methodology to the madness, because initially it's madness. You have no, you're like, this just seems insane, this whole thing, the whole idea of what I'm doing. And what happens is when you start to take ancient practices like Neigong and Qigong's a little bit more contemporary, but let's say Neigong, which is, it goes deep inside. We're not going outside, we're going inside. And you start cultivating the energetic potential, you can start validating these things for yourself. And that's really the excitement of using a system that can put a grounding to what it is that you're experiencing, rather than just these glimpses of really delusion until otherwise noted, because you can't get any sort of grasp around what it is you're experiencing. It just seems absurdly obscure. It's like, I don't know what to say. I heard a voice, I had a premonition, a lucid dream. Something is taking place that is giving me this idea there's so much more than what I perceive as a mundane reality, where I wake up and go to sleep and have a job, and the weekend turns around, then I start another week. There's all these crumbs that you find. And so there's nothing more powerful, in my opinion, than Taoist practices. Now, the reason that there's been such a secrecy throughout, or absence of Taoism on a world stage that we're familiar with, at least in the last 100 years, was from, a megalomaniac that was running China for a certain period of time, that, conducted what we call genocide, when he erased every single person off the face of the earth, 60 million of his citizens, and most of them happen to be people of faith or religion or Taoists. And there was only 3 left at one point, because he wanted to enter into what he perceived as, well, forget this ancient stuff. We need to embody the Western medicine, the Western world. And the truth is, if you're coming from a Hindu practices or a Taoist practices, these are ancient practices that have been around for longer than time itself. And if you can find the right teacher to show you and reveal reality through this lens, you're going to be very, very happy with the outcome. So what happens is, this is sort of now starting to bleed back into society. And people like myself that have been operating in the shadows for many years, just helping thousands of people over my lifetime. Now, in the last 12 months, I stepped into a social media space where I want to share it with the world. I want millions of people to access information. And this is what people are referring to, this like conscious awakening or something. I don't know. But so much of the ancient practices have been bastardized. And many of the people that have offered Taoist practices have not really handed the secret source over. They're just sort of like broken sort of meditations, a few cultivational practices. Yet when you actually alchemize the energetic potential with the cultivational practices that are real, you're going to be pretty much off to the races. You're going to be very excited about what is possible, because they're all bets are off when you start to focus on this. Now, what is the purpose of a Taoist practice really is, understanding how does it help you as a seeker. Do you want me to continue or? Yeah. So how does it help you as a seeker? Well, ultimately, from the words of the Yellow Emperor, who was basically through the Chinese history has a reputation for being the creator of Chinese culture as you know it. And from his very words, he was very clear that he was magnetized to the earth for 18 days and nights as the universe whispered to him the very infrastructure of Chinese culture. Included in that was Taoist alchemy. And Taoist alchemy literally is the seed that is the offspring of Taoist alchemy is Chinese medicine. And so you have this fundamental understanding of what we call the energetic potential within the human body that goes back beyond time in all ancient indigenous practices. You can find them across the globe. It's whether you can find someone that can actually teach them to you is another thing altogether. So when you discover that through you alchemizing the energetic potential, you reset everything. You, as we call it, return. You return to the mother. And by returning to that, you realize that the effortless action, Wu Wei, is this servitude, this selflessness, this unconditional love that is obtained through synchronicity. And it all comes down to the energetic potential, because, if we look at it from a macro to a micro, if you understand that in any sort of ancient practice, you can take a part of your physical body, whether you want to refer to it as like reflexology, and obtain the whole blueprint of the ecosystem of your energy potential just from your hand, your face, your foot. You can go anywhere and find that micro of a macro. And this also leans itself to a very watered down fundamental understanding of the entanglement, which is still, in the process. I have many friends that are physicists that are writing books on what the real nature of gravity is and what that really means. And it's completely opposite of what we perceive it as, which is like, imagine it actually pushing you up, not pulling you down, which it's perplexing to many when you take something, an object, and you drop it. It's plummeting to the end point, which is the surface of the ground. Yet in actuality, when you start crunching the numbers, or you understand how to get there, the earth is pushing upwards. It's actually expanding. It's changing. It's getting bigger. It's fascinating. But bottom line is when you reveal that, all of a sudden the energetic flow is very, very easy to validate your experience. So it can come in the form of manifestation or physical healing, mental, emotional, spiritual, and you're able to implement these things. So, within a Chinese medicine model, the most powerful branch of Chinese medicine is Qigong. You have herbology, you have Qigong, you have massage, and you have acupuncture. And, it's just like anything else. You can, if you find a practitioner that is average, then you're going to have that experience where, I tried the acupuncture, didn't work. I tried meditation, didn't work. I tried this, I tried that. I tried massage, it didn't work. This is where ritual is so very important from a Taoist. You must integrate these methods deep within your practices so that when you implement them, not only is this self-evident realization, but you can share with others and help them remember for themselves. And that's that energetic potential. The frequency is what we speak about. It's that simple, which is almost impossible for most people to wrap their mind around. The frequency. Well, what in Tao's name is the frequency? I mean, it doesn't mean much to me. And that's where experiencing these things from the energy within this dualistic perception makes it tangible for you. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I'm very interested in this because usually, like with non-duality or self-realization, when we talk about this, I feel like self-realization is only the beginning towards this alchemy, and there's a lot of resources when it comes to self-realization and getting to that point, but beyond that, it's very vague and obscure. There's not a lot of resources available.
Right. Yeah, and that's the part. I've got a dear friend of mine who's a Buddhist monk, and he's like, I'm not interested in the energetic potential. It irritates me. I just want to sit there and observe the dukkha, which to his own admission is distortion, right? So he just wants to sit and observe and just be. And that's that charge you and I are getting right now is an attunement, an oscillation. That means that this energetic potential is already realized. And so when you access that present moment, which is the now, which comes from the breath, you start to expand your wu way, which is what we call wu, the effortless action, effortless effort. And through one of my friends who has a channel on YouTube called Waidama, his famous words are, be done by the Tao. Just be done. Just be there. Be present. And so in a world of action, that doesn't seem possible. You have to physically move, which is where you become separate. The mastery comes from realizing that you don't have to do anything. The mastery comes from realizing that when you start out with the personality, the sum of your life experiences that keep you becoming more and more distorted from and misaligned from your very knowing of who you are. And it only will be generated and there'll be a path back if there's a clear method of cultivation that you can validate it, or it's nonsensical. It's just like we just talk about the stuff and, this is great. And we go on and on and on about concepts. And some people like to stay there. I'm a Pepsi challenge guy from the 80s. I'm going to take the Pepsi challenge with anyone. If you show me and I'll show you. And it really comes down to realizing that you're going to access this at will, that is you. The distortion, as my dear friend Martin would say, the dukkha is the emotional content. This 3D sort of space is really how you get distracted from knowing who you are. And so you start chasing the carrots, and you don't realize that if you are just looking at this present moment and through this alchemy, and I make it very clear, you access the mother through developing this resonance that maintains that you are no longer having to focus on. when you look at any sort of like spiritual development or conscious development, and even the word consciousness, even today, there isn't a physicist on the face of the earth that can quantify, qualify that, or understand that yet. It's still a contemplation, yet we have evidence, self-evidence, that it's real through these ancient practices, that you can validate an experience that takes place right now, that you could be in a certain mental, emotional state, and literally through accessing your own mastery, you now can alter that state at will, which would have been conceptual before. And now you could go, I return to this state, this frequency and that resonance. And it's not like a physical development where we always tell people, when you understand the bellows, that you are contracting and expanding at the same time, that you're all things and nothing at the same time. Man is not like that. Man is limited. When you understand that the vehicle that you use to anchor what we consider consciousness will have an expiration date. And that's where Taoist alchemy is a reflection of immortality, because we want to extend the lifespan of this seeker for as long as possible. So then we look at the fundamentals of what we look at when you're born into this reality. You have a constitution, we call it the Jing. The Jing is your life force, and that can be measured. I normally see most people coming around 80% of 100% of this battery pack, which is called this battery pack. And so your potential, your genetic disposition, your hereditary habits of past generations that have given you who you are today from your lineage can be altered, can be fortified, can be strengthened, and then can be attuned to this resonance. And so the cultivational practices give you mastery over the 50 trillion cells that you consider as your physical body, and then accessing that potential, that 0.07 millivolts of electricity that is the potential within every cell. So when you start to realize you have access to that, from a baseline, you come in at 80%. Through cultivational practices within Taoism, we take you up to 100. From 100, we take you to 1,000, from 1,000 to 9,000. What you have to realize is, I always ask people this question: whatever you're doing, you're an accountant, you're a judge, you're a garbage collector, you're a light worker, an energy worker, a seeker, a physicist, whatever you are, how do you feel at the end of your day? And most people, very few, will give me a different answer. Will say, well, I'm exhausted. It's a long day. It's a hard day. It's difficult, because they have yet to understand the power of who they are and realize that when you access that, you are forever abundant, timeless, endless, limitless, infinite. And that is the potential. And so people will drain on their life force. And so first you re-up your energy potential as a Taoist, bring your Jing up to its highest point, and then you basically master your relationship with the mother, the Wu Ji, which gives you this Wu Wei access. And as you develop that pathway of Wu Wei, it becomes the autonomous operating system. That's just the now moment. And so when you operate like that, you are never in lack of, you are complete, you are whole. And so, I had this conversation with Tom, a dear friend of mine, Tom Campbell. The same thing is evident. This guy's 80 years young. We go on podcasts whenever we have a podcast, it's like 2-3 hours. And the end result is always, oh man, we just got started. And you realize that, and then this is something through his own admission, and I share this and teach this with others, is that your day should end the same way it started. And to do that, you have to understand you're not being distracted. You're not being withstracted. What do you mean withstracted? your things are being, everything takes your attention, your time and attention from this electromagnetic spectrum. The polarizing effects of what we speak of, this material, will draw that energy from you if you don't understand how to maintain and tap into the mother. When you tap into the mother, you know, my longest podcast was 7.5 hours and I didn't even blink. And that comes from accessing that. And anyone, everyone, not anyone, all have the same access. It's now the mastery. So the energetic potential is the most important thing for a Taoist seeker, because you start to realize we speak on immortality, but it's even documented throughout the Taoist canons over thousands of years. Some of the lifespans of individual seekers that are a physical representation of a celestial immortal. And, you know, I channel Lao-Tzu, I mentioned, but I also channel 171 other teachers within the Taoist lineage that give you access. It's like, understand that all that is, you have insight. For an individual that's not familiar with what I'm speaking of, when you channel and you become a catalyst and a conduit for information, there is a very, it's described the same way by many people. I've never heard it described any other way. It's literally like a vortex of energy that comes down from above, which would be the heavens, and it saturates the physical body. And I am like just basically a beacon of this celestial energy. Now, today you have, and the spoken word will be not from me, but from the source of information. Now, this state that we're in on a much deeper level, when you go back to ancient practices, you can measure whether someone is channeling or not by, you know, changing or altering the physical flesh. Normally, you know, when I'm channeling, I can light a flame and put it under my hand, and it will not distort the physical flesh, because the frequency of that energy is not of this realm. And it's unbelievable until you see it and you go, that's not possible. Well, I just experienced it. Yes, it is. And that's where that feeling comes in, right? So, you know, I always tell people, if you're thinking, you're not knowing. If you're knowing, you're feeling. And that feeling is a validation. You know, we've had peaks and flows of that throughout this conversation, where your transmission, you're oscillating with the information I'm sharing with you, and you're experiencing it through, you're admitting it. It's evident, and you can feel it. It's like there's many different energetic profiles, but you start with this chill and expansion, and it comes from the core of you. And for someone who's a more science-based neuroplasticity nut, that comes from that center point, what we call the Taiji pole, or the vagus nerve, the vagus nerve. You are experiencing this thing that is emanating from the core center of you. And when you start to realize that the simplicity of your journey comes down to, is the glass half empty or full, things start changing. You know, you're like, all right, well, that's pretty simple. And from a dear friend of mine, Hans Wilhelm, who's a conscious seeker and has been for 40 years, he writes a lot of incredible books, children's books, helping children understand consciousness and you know, just a different state of awareness. And he's like, are you contracting or expanding? I know if I'm contracting or expanding. If I'm expanding, I'm moving into it. If I'm contracting, I'm moving away from it. It's like a simplistic way to look at things. But if you're just starting right now and you're listening to this conversation and you want to enter into your own journey, your own seeking, it starts with that. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think awareness is a very core part of this, because if you're not even aware where your energy is getting spent, you are going to be unconscious about how your day goes through, and at the end of the day, you're all exhausted. And that's a very vague stage to be in. When I feel like the part of this alchemical process is when you become more and more aware of where your energy is getting spent. And even subtle things like watching a video online you know that if this video is sucking my energy or it's giving me energy, and becoming more and more aware of how to manage that. That's why awareness, I feel like it's very core for this alchemy.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. That's why to not be stuck in this sort of psychological contemplation, you need the alchemy, you need the energetic potential, and you need to be able to access it at will. And that comes from the mastery. That's why people are lured by these ancient practices, whether it's a Hindu practice, whether it's a Taoist practice. These are so ancient, and people, they talk about it, and more commonly, I think familiar wise would be a Kundalini experience. People use this as a describing their energetic potential. Over all my years consciously in this path, I've only ever come across 3 people that are Kundalini masters. And when I say that, I'm not dismissing anyone's energetic experience, because there are a million ways up the mountain. There's 1000%. You cannot limit this. I always remind people, if you dismiss someone else's belief system, you dismiss your own. And that's why Taoism is also so appealing, because you're part of that self-realized seeker. You validate it for yourself. It's conceptual and otherwise noted. The energy, the energetic potential becomes realized that you can validate it. You don't need anyone else to tell you. Once you're given these practices, you can clearly see whether you're on the target or off the target, and through your own experience, through your own realized experience, and it's validated. And it doesn't become some sort of like a fleeting moment or a transitory thought, or it's tangible. And that's so important, to make sure that the psyche doesn't get you so deep into the weeds that you cannot ever access the intellect, the intuitive. So when you get there, you want to realize there's, again, everything comes back to this bellow state. Everything, just even understanding the brain, the left and right side of the brain. The center point in ancient practices would be the third eye. The vesica is the center point, which is within Taoism. That's the access to the Wu Ji, the mother. So you can look at this on all different layers, right down to the deciphering code, which is the yin and yang, the symbol of Taoism that is universal. I can go anywhere. I can literally walk down the street and find someone that will have a tattoo of the yin and yang on their arm. And I always get excited when I say that. So what does that mean to you? Oh, it's good and bad and up and down. And it's exciting because there is this universal understanding. And this is really what's taking place within the universe all the time. It never stops. And so for you to really access that primordial mother, you must be aware that, as you said, I really fundamentally agree with you so much. All of this is on the awareness, the self-realized awareness that you can validate through your experience. And that experiencer comes from that cultivation. And, because it really, if we look at science and the way it progressed, it could be quite some time before you're going to have all the components that validate what you're experiencing. Yet when people talk about, I don't know how much you've listened to Nassim Haramein, but he has an interesting theory, what he calls a unified field theory. And he talks deeper about that and understanding about the compression of this energetic potential, and how there's a black hole in the center of everything in the universe. And this is an interesting theory for a lot of physicists. I'll share that with some of my physicist friends, and they're going, I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me at all. Like, I need to see the numbers. I got to see the formulas. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. Yet when he talks about that, and you talk to a Taoist, this is fundamental alchemy 101 when you realize it. There are systems that we use to access what we call the dantians, which is the elixir field, the energy centers. More commonly, you would refer to them as chakras. they are accessed through a specific alchemical process. Each energy center, this is the sun, this is the earth, and this is the moon. Now, there are three accesses to neural networks. If you go back to something a little bit more neuroplasticity-ish, you would talk about how there's a neural network between the brain and the heart that creates a coherent fluidity, which then leans back to this idea that people have spoken on for so many, I mean, it's your universal understanding. Oh, I led with my head. I worked 20% of the time. I felt with my heart, it was 50-50. I got a gut feeling, it was 30-60. And this is just a universal language. But what's going on is on a much deeper level from an alchemical process, is once you align these dantians, you will have 100% accuracy on your gut feelings, 100% every time. And this leads you back to the ancient practices within the Hindu practices, within yogi practices, within Taoist practices, Buddhist practices. Any of these ancient belief systems start there, but we must always remember that's the belief system. For you to be a knower, you have to be able to validate it. It has to be validated for you, or it's conceptual. And that's where people get stuck in the belief system, and they never realize the knowing is only another breath away. But that energy center. So for a Taoist, this is the upper dantian. It's the light of information and the sun. Middle dantian is the earth, and that's the information. And the lower dantian is the moon, and that comes from the energetic potential. Now, that is completely contradictory to a basic alchemical process from the average alchemist that would talk about energy potential, would refer to the lower dantian as a cauldron. Now, this is where people get confused, because the primordial mother is the cloth that is the echoing reflection of all things. From within the sun is the creation of all things. The void reveals the light. And so the mother created the sun. And that's the oscillating effect of yin and yang. And so this would then return to Nassim's theory of the black hole energy being within everything. Now, within Taoism, there's an alchemical process called the witnessing of the death of a star, the rising of the energetic potential. Now, it's a system where the death of the star, the rising of that energy, for example, the spirit that is the keeper of your middle dantian is what we call the red phoenix within Taoism. And so through this alchemical process, you witness the death of a star, the rising of the red phoenix, and the revealing of black hole energy. And people are like, oh, this is kind of weird. This is kind of crazy. But you feel a visceral response from that. You go, hang on, I'm not seeing data here, but I feel it. I know what he's talking about. I believe you. And that's the fundamental experiencer, is when you get to that point and you can cultivate it yourself. Now, we don't look at things as good and bad, heaven and hell. They're polarizing energetic potential. And so when you go back to the void, you go back to the primordial mother, all things return. And that's when you can access that energy. And, it's mind-blowing when you start getting down to the fundamentals, and you have someone like Nassim that's bringing up this information. And, I want to see the numbers. I want to see the formulas that can validate his theory. They're still in the works, but when he speaks on it, it completely is validated through Taoist ancient practices that have been going on longer than time itself, and handed down from generation to generation. And so that crystalline effect that you get when you start using the alchemical process is upper is platinum, middle is gold, lower is silver. And you take this potential, these elements, and you create this crystalline, palpable substance that we call qi, that is not the same. It's not the same as energy. It's not the same as the electromagnetic spectrum. And this is where we come to this way that Nassim is talking about the event horizon on a black hole. And that once you enter that, now you have this access that, everyone has had this ominous sort of fear that it's a vortices that just sucks everything in, which can be, debated to the validity of that. But he validates the Taoist path by, accessing this literally infinite energy. That's what a black hole offers. A wormhole offers this infinite energy potential, which is why we've always used it within the ancient practices of returning to the mother. And, some people might consider the mother, primordial energy, God, Tao, Buddha, as frequentially a scalar wave, maybe. For me, it's never really resonated using the scalar wave as a measurement of what it is that you're experiencing. The evidence is in the experience. The evidence is being completely reset. The evidence is you have the mastery. So, and you'll see it in a physical healing, a mental, emotional healing, a spiritual healing, by resetting the individual. And the more you access and cultivate this practices, it becomes the autonomous operating system. You don't have to think, and you're bringing this frequency with you, which is part of what cultivating is maintaining and doing the spiritual reps that you would possibly do in a gym. But a gym is very short-lived. It's a very limited access. And if not maintained, you will lose that potential, like physically, like your cardiovascular will decline, your VO2, your muscle to fat loss. It will all start to go south if you don't maintain a certain way of eating, a certain way of living. And that returns us also to what we call resting, which leans towards, breatharian sort of techniques, where a devout Taoist will eat a meal every second day, and you realize you have more energy than you ever had in your life. You're like, hang on a second, what's going on here? This is insane. And this is part of accessing all these incredible tools, and also resetting the physical distortion of the mitochondria within the cells of the seeker. You can start resetting, and we always talk about everything has a reset of a 9 count. 9 is the highest point of mastery, and so within a 9 count, you can reset everything and return to the mother. And so within 9 hours, within 18 hours, you are fundamentally seeing a chemistry that's taken place in your body that would be referred to as autophagy, where you are now cleaning up the inner workings of what it is that's going on in your body through that mastery, mastering the hormonal cascade, mastering how your body utilizes insulin so that you don't become insulin resistant, you become insulin efficient. And, so this trickles over into so many other aspects. And then, of course, we go deep into the mastery of yin and yang, hot and cold. And so, when you get into certain temperatures, your ability to master the chi within the cell potential becomes measured. Like if you're in a cold environment and you're able to channel that energy potential within you as an autonomous state, that all you do is now, if you're the present moment, it's no longer anything more than you think it and it's done. And people are like, hang on, what? That just sounds like what, the genie from Aladdin or something? That's like so obscure. But you have to be able to master and know when you're in that center point, and you will literally have this mastery to access the primordial fabric that is the now moment. That resonance will give you the ability, your life will become synchronistic, like on a whole nother level, a whole new version of what people call charmed or lucky, because you can access that now moment, which is not offered to many and understood by many and only by a few. And that's personally my driving force, is to awaken everyone to their own potential. And once you step away from, as one of my teachers, Jade Emperor, would say, when you believe, when you know you are not of this body, what can harm you? Nothing. And this seems, when I first shared this with my mother many decades ago, she freaked out. I don't want to die. No, that's not what we're talking about here. And initially, when you're framed in this polarizing reality, emotions will control your attention. Emotions, thoughts, the three ingredients to reality in of itself is a thought, feeling, and emotion. That's it. Like, if you really break it down, that's all that is. And so what's the value of a thought, feeling, and emotion? Well, a thought can be generated as a memory, but without the energetic potential of the emotion and the feeling, you can use it as wisdom. But if you have the feeling and the emotion that is still attached to that very experience, you will always replay it. Like, as we talk about it from a physics perspective, that fractal pattern will be replicated over and over and over again. You have to return back to your knowing through a mastery of the energetic potential that puts you in line. You're not misaligned with the emotional stuff. You become realigned when you can just realize that that personality is there for whatever you want to experience it at. You can be in your emotions and be in the suffering, be in the victimhood, be in the limited perspective of humanness, or you can enter this state that people speak of. I am a fractal of God. I am now. And you can obtain that by doing none of the above. The emotional content is the distraction. Once you realize and step away from that, you're not being distracted anymore. You're actually regenerating, you're enhancing, you're expanding on a second by second basis. And when people realize they have this mastery and they have the ability to do it, and it's just about remembering how to do it, is what I like to refer to as the resonance, is me showing you a path back to you remembering who you are. People get dumbfounded with the fact that they can change the state they're in. Normally, it's within a Tao, it's about 4 seconds. You can shift from an emotional state to your Wu Wei within fractions of a second. And furthermore, the more you invest in your own cultivational practices, as I was referring to earlier, you stay there. It doesn't become a transient sort of like dissipated thing. That means that when you exercise, you will get a result. If you don't maintain that, it will leave you, and you'll see evidence in that on the scale, your health, blood work, biomarkers. You'll be like, oh, if I go astray and I start eating, bad foods and, not getting enough rest and not exercising, I lose this potential that I work so hard for. Whereas when you are developing your spiritual consciousness, it never leaves you. It becomes greater and greater and greater. That means that you can leave it for a week, come back to it, and it's more powerful than it was a week ago. And people don't understand that. And I mean, technically, you get that from a physical development perspective, but it's only limited. So if you take a rest for a week and you haven't exercised, and then you come back, and due to the fact that, all the, from an eccentric perspective, when you tear down that muscle through the range of motion of an exercise, you lead the body to repair. All that chemistry is necessary to repair. But initially, if resting for a week, you go into the gym, you'll find that you're temporarily stronger than you were when you left it last. But then it leaves itself. And if you overtrain, you start to see the counter effects of this dualistic perspective, which will still be met from a spiritual if you don't understand how to access the present moment. And so that's what I always lean on, the energetic potential, because you cannot dispute it when you extract something from a conscious state that may come in the form of information. It may come in the form of energy, physical, tangible experience that someone would consider supernatural, superhuman, paranormal. This is the state that you truly are. You just have to allow yourself to experience that. And that's the simplicity of it is so redundant that people just dismiss it. They're like, no, it can't be that easy. I need to be in a training in a temple for 40 years in the lotus position. No, once you get there, and I always remind people that ritual, the cultivation is most important for the seeker, because then you validate it. I've had students that have literally sat in a temple for 30 years in the corner of, just in the lotus position, incredible back pain, receiving nothing of their awakening. And then within a few moments of me teaching them specific alchemical process, they've had more, spiritual enlightenment, aha, epiphany moments than they ever had in 20 years. And so it's about the information. It's about sharing the information. It's about being selfless. It's about returning to who you are, which is this unconditional servitude. And, when you do that, just as the Jade Emperor would say, your gift is your offering. And so this cycle of returning to, as you receive, you give, you receive. And, then you could, possibly lean on, another polarizing effect within this state, which is the karmic model of understanding. What does karma really mean to you, and how is it laid out within your own journey? Because if you are subject to emotional content, if you're subject to fear, karma can be problematic. I mean, I can walk under a ladder and I believe I'm going to have good luck. And 3 incredible things happen to me momentarily after I walk under the ladder, where if you fundamentally believe that you're going to get bad luck from walking on the ladder, well, that's exactly what the universe, the Tao, will give to you. You see, it seems self-evident when there's things that someone would perceive as negative take place, right? You go, oh, well, that works. Well, how come it doesn't work when I want positive things to happen? Because that's how you perceive reality. And so as long as you perceive reality with that, then you're going to be limited by that. And that enters the belief system. Does that make sense?
It does. And thanks for doing a deeper dive into the whole process of alchemy. If we had to summarize this conversation today, what are some of the hallmarks in alchemy do you think a person usually experiences? Like, what are some transformations that most people experience in this?
Well, yeah. First and foremost, you start to realize you have this mastery over what you think is an autonomous process. So you're able to tap into things that people tell you you have no access to, which would be the unconscious. And so that is one of the first things that becomes very sobering for a Taoist seeker, is when you realize, holy moly, I can stop my heart. I can return my breath to 0 point. I can heal my flesh before my very eyes. I can heal others with this energetic potential by using that resonance, which is the one of the big gems that comes from the cultivational practice. And then you're able to separate electric from magnetic and transmute that energy into things that are going to be transformative within the 3D reality. So the first stage is understanding that entering through the breath, you have this incredible ability to literally stop time and alters something that is subject to what we perceive as 3D, and it becomes nothing more than, you know, an idea from many. But when you master that, there is evidence that you're doing it, and that access is that autonomous process that most people are like, I can't do anything about my respiration, my blood pressure, my thoughts. All these things are dictated by the neural network in my body, and you know, my brain controls everything. Yet, you know, you go deeper and you realize that everything enters and exits through the heart, and that the much bigger picture has all these different layered effects when you start to get into the alchemical process. But first and foremost will be that sobering awakening, and then you start to get into that energy potential. And that's the stuff where you just have one epiphany after another, and you're able to show people, which is so very important, in my opinion.
And that seems like that could be subjective for each person. It's whatever they want to express through their own energetic expression.
Yeah, there is the subjective perspective. You create a language where a lot of my friends who are remote viewers, you would call it an ideogram, where you're able to create a language between your conscious and unconscious. That can show itself in many different ways, depending on where you start. But, you know, high levels of ascension is clear audio, clear vision, things of that nature, things that I help people develop, those what goes under the blanket of sensory perception. These are not just like one little event, but there are many developed skills that you can acquire yourself, and you can see and experience these things firsthand. And I like the way you said subjective, because it's subjective and until otherwise noted. Because once you start raising and you understand how to raise your frequency, everything will be a universal, unconditional knowing. So all the trappings of the distraction of your personality will just fade out. You will not be in lack of anything. You will not be seeking, you'll be knowing. And that comes from the inaction, where you don't have to go anywhere. We always remind people, let the man who's never left his village, let him know he's seen the world, because it's right here. And that becomes initially on a low level. Taoists will look at entry level as love, which is subjective. It could be rainbows and unicorns for one person, and razor blades and bunny rabbits to another person. So until you start raising your resonance, your frequency, you will have this altered view. And as you continue to raise it, it becomes a universal selfless servitude that is very apparent, and you don't have to think. Whenever you've had any acts of selflessness, if you spend a second and go over them, you never once had a thought in your mind. Someone needs a hand, you reach out and give it to them. Someone needs assistance. And this all comes back to this universal frequency. And within a Taoist seeker's perspective, the purpose of your existence being an ambassador to planet Earth is to raise that conscious frequency so that everyone taps back into empathy.
That's
and
not,
that we're in tune. Pardon me?
sorry, that's not what I think I may have said it incorrectly. That's not what I meant by subjective experience. I meant more like mastery could mean different for different people. Not everyone would, maybe not everyone wants to be a healer, or that's what I meant, like subjective meaning, what mastery means for someone could be different for others.
Yes.
Experimenting that with yourself, like what it is that needs to be mastered.
What you want to master. No. I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's the trappings in the fabric of the energetic potential becomes a universal thing. So you will get to a certain resonance where you may have one viewpoint, and once you continue to climb the frequencies, that becomes a universal thing. This is where you find like a lot of the gurus, they're childlike in their nature, because the simplicity of the viewpoint is accept everything at face value. Just be this present moment. And all of that is conceptual for so many until otherwise noted. And yes, your mastery is for you to determine what that is, whether you want to be a healer or just a connection point, or just be, which is the ultimate, to be. But furthermore is to raise humanity from a Taoist perspective, is to raise humanity's consciousness and tap into that empathy. And so many other people find that that's kind of a universal messaging that a lot of people resonate with. Is it everyone's journey? Absolutely not. But it's a very clear path for a Taoist seeker.
Yeah, because in the mainstream world, there's a lot of stress on objective mastery. Like if you become a billionaire and if you are a CEO, then you have mastered. Like there are like objective concepts of what gets referred to as being a master. Whereas in spiritual journey, I feel like it could have so many different expressions.
Oh yeah, there are a million ways up the mountain. I think we mentioned that earlier, and that is for you. And that's why the energetic mastery is critical for the seeker, because then you're not having this transient sort of moment where you can't really solidify it. It's just like a little glimpse, what we call the spiritual dragon glimpse of something. You want to fortify it, you want to reinforce it, you want to repeat it. And that's where the energetic potential comes in, which is the electromagnetism that we're swimming in right now, which is the foundation and the center point of this existence, has been measured within that. So if you can take that mastery, access the Wu Ji, which then creates Wu Wei, you can obtain anything that you desire, which is really what is driving you. And as you resonate higher, it becomes irrelevant, the need to acquire. And everyone always goes through this where, oh, I took the shirt off my back, I handed all my belongings, God, please take me. And they're like, why is God not listening? Because you're attempting to frame yourself virtue within Taoism, we call it, when you act in virtue, you have none. And this need to frame it, as you said, this objective idea of what it is to be spiritually awakened is the very fundamental thing that drives me, my personality. I have one, just so you know. So when someone gives me an absolute truth of everything, I always remind people to about face and run in the other direction, because your absolute truth is for you. It's not mine. It's not Suma's. It's not John Smith down the street. It's your truth. And this is where it can be a little, it can get a little up for discussion. A lot of people are like, well, the truth is the truth. Well, what is the truth? You know, I mean, you can talk about the simple fact that we all obtain this physical flesh, and that, you know, this is the fundamentals of what biology is, sure. But then how you show the evidence or how your path is created is for the individual seeker. And so when someone has a belief system and it's so deeply entrenched in their identity, that can be problematic, in my opinion. Just an offering.
Thanks for describing that so clearly, that these are very like nuanced things that become very difficult to talk about. And you're one of the few I've come across who also draw attention towards energetic transformation, which usually gets like sometimes even discouraged in the self-realization realm. They even sometimes it's seen as like more of seeking.
Yeah.
So I'm glad like you were able to like clear out and speak about these insights and share some clarity.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is the thing that people get distracted by, and that's why the practices is so important. And you start with this ability to access a state of awareness that you didn't think was possible. So meditation is always a great entry level, and then you start to realize when you're given a clear path through practices like the ones I teach people, you do quantum jumps of awareness very quickly. That, you know, it's beyond the mind. It's beyond the mind. And, you know, that's that starting point is you have to, everyone has to start somewhere. And this is where I get a little, I would say, I get a little cheeky when people, oh, why my spiritual practice is greater than yours. And okay. All right, yeah, we're cool. We're good. We're good. Let's look at what is the potential that you're playing with. What is it that's giving you this validated, verifiable knowing that this is the way? And you know, that's even right down to science. I mean, this is the way. Oh, well, I've worked it out. I've got the formulas. Okay. I find that a lot of people these days are skipping that aspect, even though it's a very new language and it's very much appreciated by many people. And I will lean on it if I need to help someone understand a little deeper. And it works for their path of like language that they know. But generally speaking, I mean, a lot of people want to skip over that and they just want to go to the experience. And that's where, you know, you have a tuning fork. This tuning fork, this physical flesh can give you that instantly. And so if you water it down to that contracting and expanding, you can start identifying with your own divinity, your own access to this now moment, the Wu Ji, from just that. And so what I'm suggesting, what I'm proposing is that the truth is you're already whole. You need to look nowhere outside of yourself to find the answers. That's where you need to gravitate to what it is that makes you feel whole, that gives you this visceral, kinesthetic, somatic response that goes, okay, I'm onto something. Like, you know, I could literally, the first time I read the Tao Te Ching was, you know, that was the beginning and end of all things. I sat down, I put it on a table, I started reading it. The words raised up off the page, they swirled around me and dropped right into my heart. And I disappeared for 81 verses that would take any avid reader output of like 20 minutes to consume. I was gone for 2 days, disappeared, because there is incredible magic. And we go into what is real magic, what is the magic of your affinity, your relationship with whatever it is, whether it's the Bible, whether it's the Dharma, whether it's the Tao Te Ching, whatever, it gives you that completion. And that's part of like what this spectrum is about, right? Starting and finishing. Human beings need to start and finish things. If I reach my hand out to you, your inclination is to reach it back to me and shake my hand. It's a natural instinct of a hetero action, is what a psychologist would call it. You know, what you start, you must finish, which is the introspective analytical components of humanness. It's like, I need to know.
Beautifully described. I really appreciate this conversation. I feel like you were able to point to a lot of insights that are crucial in this path. And I can already sense that you provide that space for people around you, a space for a non-judgmental space to allowing them to be. So clearly you have mastered your energy.
Well, thank you, my dear friend. I appreciate that. I just you step away from knowing, because that's the once you know, you just allow and be the present moment. And so you're no longer seeking this desire to, I need to be something. I need to identify as something. And so many people ask me, they're like, well, what is, well, why? Why are we here? What's the purpose of our existence? And I always answer with, why not? And people are like, excuse me? Because I mean, really, the deciphering decoder, the yin and yang, speaks that volumes. It gives you the evidence, and everything is within everything else. Everything is within the contracting and expanding. We are a whole. We are whole. We are not absent or in lack of. That's the distraction. And when people realize that, they're sort of dumbfounded. I mean, Lao Tzu specifically, a lot of people will ask me to ask Lao Tzu, well, what's going on with today? How is it? Is financial ruin, death and destruction, apocalypse? And at the beginning of the year, he was very clear. He came out with a very interesting, he's kind of cheeky, but he said, imagine you're like a grain of sand, asking the beach, what are we doing today? Fall back into the beach and be realized. And then I go, whoa, I don't even know where to go with that. That speaks volumes, as in you are part of this tapestry. You are another reflection of a facet, which is what we call perfection. So perfection is the diamond. And so that diamond gets compressed, like a diamond gets compressed. All of a sudden, you are revealing this incredible element. And so, that comes back to how you access this Wu-Ji, the mother. And when you're seeing it visually, you will see this bright light, this center point, and it's undeniable that you can start with seeing it in your third eye, start seeing it with your eyes open as you develop your own sensory perception, and you will be able to enter that center point consciously and create and master anything and everything that you can imagine, as the imagination is also another self-evident gateway and portal to the Tao, which is another conversation, I imagine.
I want to be mindful about your time. So
Yes.
just one last question I had. It's a fun question. I read it in your bio that you have witnessed some miracles. I would love to hear some of them that you witnessed, and your experience. It sounds very fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, the first one that was a banger of a mind blower was the gangrenous flesh turning back to pink in color in 40 minutes while I'm sitting there watching it. That was it. That was my entry. It's like, well, how could you possibly blow your mind any more than that? Well, it just happens on a daily basis. I've seen bones fuse back. I've seen one, it comes to my mind specifically. This woman had this sebaceous cyst that was the size of a watermelon, right, on her breast because she had a blocked duct from breastfeeding. And when I turned up to bring the resonance, her and I witnessed this thing swell because all her flesh was very inflamed. It was very red. Like you could see this thing popping out of her breast. The thing rose up, skin opened up, a liter of pus poured out of her chest and then sealed back up in front of our very eyes. And like, you go, hang on a second, this guy's smoking something. It's like, listen, when you bring this resonance, I cannot put a limitation on what is possible, because what happens to the individual is them remembering. It's like they're returning to a healed state, a whole state, a complete state, which is, impossible for most people to understand, because through society, we've created this relationship with someone else in a white coat telling you this is what you need to do for your own health, your mental health, your physical health, your spiritual health. In turn, all it is like, imagine, I mean, you're surrounded by EMFs, you're surrounded by these disturbing frequencies that will literally draw from your physical body. How simplistic is it to be given or offered the contemplation of meeting that resonance? And once you meet it, what happens is your physical body will start to oscillate and reverberate to a point where you possibly, if you were looking at WebMD, you would probably think you're, having some type of a epileptic fit, because as it starts to reset the flesh at a subatomic level, your whole body starts to mimic that frequency. And so when you first meet it, strange things really happen. I always tell people that when you first experience your knowing of who you are and you remember it, give yourself 48, 72 hours to climatize to this new frequency, because it will present itself. So the washing of the emotions and the thoughts will start to rise to the top. I had a equivalent to what we consider a dark night of the soul. Some people call it that. I don't know whether you've heard of this term before. And so this was right back when I first experienced this stuff. And I literally had every thought, every feeling, every emotion for 5 days straight. By the third day, I wanted to just kill myself. Like, I couldn't handle it anymore. I would literally attempt to distract myself, because this was the awakening. This was the awakening that was entering at a subatomic level all the way up to what we perceive in front of us. And this all was returning me to my knowing, returning me to that resonance. Now, I would go to the movies and I would attempt to watch a movie to distract myself while all this turmoil has taken place. And I literally, something as benign as like a naked woman would walk out on the screen and I would throw up. I would have a visceral response where I puked on a guy in front of me in the theaters, because it is something that is foreign that I'm resetting. Then these are evidence of these elements within me. And by reflecting from that information coming back to me, that was the physical evidence of that. And so that was like a car wash of like complete epiphanies and realization. At the end of it, of course, I came out the other side. Yet these types of physical healings are met by, how I like to explain it, is, I've seen tumors, people will come to me and go, grandma's in a coma, she's going to die in 24 hours. I will tap into the energy and say no. And like, I've had this conversation with Tom Campbell, and Tom Campbell has had very similar experiences. So when I tap into the energy and I say no, and by his own admission of his large consciousness system, which is his theory of reality, right? The theory of everything, his version of his Tao version of what reality is, he uses a large consciousness system. And by your probability, with your attention and intention, you are now changing the metrics, the variable, by putting that into place. So whenever I experience that, when someone comes to me and their loved one is sick, and I say, no, don't, it's all good. I've just reset that frequency. And they're like, I can't believe it. And then the next day, a doctor will be like, the woman woke up out of her coma and she's fine and she lives happily ever after, because I am not invested in this. Now, people need to understand something. When you get to that present moment, you're not about, hey, I'm San Qing, I'm the next coming of Jesus, I'm the almighty healer, I'm the spiritual leader, I'm all these things. You're nothing. To obtain that center point, to obtain the now moment, you must be of no place, person, or thing. And so when you access it, the closest thing that I could attribute to watching physical flesh heal is a wiggling effect. So when you look at it, you'll watch the flesh wiggle and then reset, wiggle and then reset, wiggle and reset until it returns back to the original state. Now you can do that with spoon bending. I don't know. Have you ever tried spoon bending before?
I haven't.
That, I've got a lot of friends that are spoon benders it's a state of awareness. It's another skill that you develop, and that is literally the same state as watching physical flesh heal, where you focus on that center point, and within the breath in and the breath out, you can literally you first there's entry levels, like the entry level for spoon bending would be grabbing a spoon, feeling the tactile resistance of the metal on your flesh in your hands, and you kind of feel it, and you're like, oh, I can feel a little flex. When you put your intention to the center point of the spoon, and you realize that it's changed its complete profile, it will just melt like butter, and you'll experience it with your own eyes. And of course, the next level is taking, a fork and sort of melting it like a candle just in your hands, or furthermore, taking a fork and bending the prongs in either direction, which is like a graduate level thing. But you are using this. You are the present moment. And so people are like, oh, this is mind-blowing to me. I promise you, you start with something as simple as spoon bending, and that makes you validate. This is why this self-evident realization is so important. It's like, holy moly, to think, and after this conversation, I hope that people go out and grab a spoon and just sit there for a minute and play with it, and literally breathe in and out into the spoon center point. And as you say it, as you realize it, it will just melt, it will mold, it will disintegrate, it will melt like butter. And people just can't believe it, because initially you're having a tactile response. So you're like, oh, I bent that. Take the biggest piece of metal you can find. Trust me, it happens under any circumstance. And of course, you want to develop those skills so that you don't have to have any action. Remember, the inaction is the key, right? And so when you can actually just be the present moment, it will happen. And so all these supernatural, paranormal things are just being present. I want people to understand, all I do is remember, bring a frequency, the individual, the group, the collective attune to that frequency, and they remember themselves. And it's like, holy moly. And so you get away from this need to, I'm the healer, I'm the center point of the guru, I can do it, no one else can. Everyone can do it. It's a matter of attuning yourself. Everyone's come up with the idea, they understand this is a tuning fork. But when you get there, and I, there was a point there where I used to love just, if someone would have a cyst, I would love to just raise it to the surface of the skin and watch it just pop open, because it was fun. But you graduate, you come to a certain level, and you go, okay, wow, this is now a completed moment. I've validated it for myself. This is why the energetic stuff is important, that people use this, and you become in awe and enamored with this moment, and then you realize this is a part of you, and then you move to your next level of frequency, and it doesn't become something that you get caught up in. And I do have some students. I've only ever seen 3 people levitate in my lifetime. 2 were Kundalini masters deep within the Indonesian jungles. And the other one is one of my students. And, well, why don't you levitate, Jifu? Because I don't care to levitate. Just this comes right back to what Suma said, which is like, what is your purpose? What are you finding from this, right? This is this subjective moment where you will find your own mastery. I don't get warm and fuzzy about wanting to levitate. I couldn't care less about it. Yet watching physical healings, mental, emotional, spiritual healings, that excites me. So just like the mimicking effects, the mirroring effects of the universe, it gives you more, and you maintain that resonance, and you're able to maintain it. And I honestly believe it also helps raise someone else's consciousness and go, that was impossible in my mind up until 5 minutes ago. And now I have to change my whole view of reality because I witnessed that. Simple things like, enveloping my forearm. These are more Qigong sort of practices. You envelop my forearm, stick a skewer through it, pull it out. You won't see an entry or exit point. Creating, anesthesia. This is just a state of awareness. This is part of the mastery of Neigong and Qigong. That's why people gravitate to it, because you can see self-evident results. Now, you can also stay in the weeds of those results and just want to stay there. Like, I'm the guru that levitates and burns things with their hands, and has the ability to apply telekinesis and move objects. You will find that center point for yourself, where this is what excites me. This is what gives me the desire. And so what we call is the substance. There is a plasma that is created when you're performing telekinesis and things of that nature, where it's an extension of your auric field, where it's palpable. So when you put your intention to something, you will see it move, whether it's just a spin wheel, and you start out with the real basic stuff that gives you that evidence, where you're in an enclosed space, there's no air, there's no ventilation, and you're able to, through your intention, move this object, and it's exciting. But then people get that bite, and then they get lost. They get too excited, and then they lose the handle of it, which sets them back a little bit, and then they get disheartened, and then they get separated again, and then they just give up because it seems like a mountain too high to climb. When in actuality, once you get a method, that's why I always tell people to seek someone that has a method that can show you what it is that you're experiencing. That will never happen. From a Taoist seeker's perspective, that will never happen, because you have the ability to show yourself on a day-by-day basis. You can return to that, and you can show this evidence can be seen by yourself or an observer of what it is that you're doing. And that's really important. That's so very important. But yeah, remote viewing, precognition is, that's a very easily measurable sort of state of awareness that is becoming more and more common. And many scientists are validating that state and your ability to access that. And, it comes out in experiments, and, we might call it, within the spiritual path, psychic abilities, you're accessing information that technically you shouldn't be able to. That in theory, in a Darwin's theory model, this is not how we're not operating that way. We're operating separate. We're looking at things where you have to act to see the results. You have to transmute it from this physical state to another physical state. You can't just enter the now moment and obtain this ability that alters this 3D. Well, that's now becoming more and more evident that you can, and you just need to find someone to help you see that and show you those skills. And then that's where all the ancient practices come in. I always want people to go back to their ritual processes, because they miss that. They miss, it's like, oh, you're Buddhist, you're Taoist, you're Christian, you're Catholic. How about we're all those things and none of them at the same time? Allow yourself to experience it and determine that for yourself.
Thank you for sharing these examples, because it's helpful to hear your own evidence, what you have experienced,
Yeah.
And we all can pick our own experiment that suits us and get our own validation or some of these ideas. So it's kind of like,
no, it's exciting. It really is. And the evidence, just through our conversation, people can feel that energetic palpability, that polarizing effect of our conversation is that now moment. And you want resonance, you want evidence. It starts with the electromagnetism that is within all of us. And if you use simple things like Lao Gong points, which is what we call the hands, you can start to validating it for yourself and go, whoa, what is that? Whoa, well, I never thought about it that way. Like San Qing just said, look at my, now I kind of feel something. What is that? And that starts you on your journey, and you go, whoa, hang on a second. Am I playing with my mind, or is this really physically happening? And the more and more you seek, the more and more you'll find that. And do you have energetic practices, or do you work with energy at all yourself?
It's very interesting. You just now mentioned about the hands, and this is something I did. I don't try it intentionally, but I've mostly experienced like during near sleep state, where when I'm falling asleep, almost asleep, but still kind of awake, and I'm holding on to my bed. And it's like a very like stiff iron rod.
It's like they're like mitts,
Yes,
right?
and my hand starts pulsating. It's almost like a feeling as though my hand is melting with the rod, and I can almost melt that rod, kind of a feeling. It's
well, that is the beginning, my friend, of bending spoons. This is, you are right there. So what happens from a respiratory perspective? This is a battery, right? So as you activate your respiration, which is evident by anyone just living, just breathing, you start to what we call gather the riches. So you're experiencing this accumulation. What happens is that it seeps into the rest of your physical flesh, from the hands, the face, and the feet. That's the first entry points, because they're the highest neural network within the body. And so you start to accumulate the energetic potential there. And so, you would probably even notice right now, if you move your hands, you can feel that there's something going on there. Have you noticed that right now?
I usually feel it a lot with my hands, the pulsating energy. And when I'm close to like sleeping state, that's when that energy is, you can feel it a lot more stronger.
Yeah, because you're now dropping down into a theta state. You're creating, and you already have activated something within your energy architecture that is starting to accumulate that. Normally, when I go to sleep, I wake up and I'm like the ever-ready bunny. I have accumulated so much chi through my own practices. I don't have to do anything. Just the breath alone accumulates it. So when I use that chi, I'm just maintaining and enriching the physical flesh. And then you tap into the mother to do everything else that you need to do within this space. You never, ever sacrifice your own energy, life force. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a very beautiful energy. It just feels very healing to the body. It's fascinating.
Yeah, that you are on your entry level, my friend, of just starting your journey. That description is how you enter into that state and access the ability to alter real time.
Yeah, I'm just figuring out, like, maybe I should have a practice right now. I don't have a proper practice. Maybe that's something I should figure out, because I usually see these conversations as my practice, spiritual practice.
Yeah. Well, I mean, right now you can feel the palpability of the energy. It's now, right? And, if you put your hands up like this, right? Now, this is what they call PK touch. When I do that, you don't have to do anything. You can describe to the audience what you're experiencing.
It's just a magnetic kind of connection.
Yeah, like you're experiencing it now, and that's the present moment. Like, we could go deep. In 5 minutes, I could have you oscillating off to another planet. It's the now moment, and that's what happens. It's like, this is what people consider impossible. That's how fast energy can be transmuted, and you witness an instant healing. Like, does it surprise you that you're experiencing this, like without any conscious awareness? It's like, it's just now.
Not the energy part, because I am a bit sensitive person. To energy, I'm very sensitive. I pick on. And That's something I feel like one has to learn when they are very energetically sensitive, because sometimes it can be overwhelming when you're out in public.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I remember the first time I switched on my clear senses. Everyone was enveloped in their aura. I could see the color of their auras, and I would bump into them with my aura like a ball. And the energy was everywhere. So when I do any type of reading or psychic ability, I just look at the energy potential of whatever it is, place, person, or thing, and it will reveal itself. The emotional, the mental, emotional, the physical, the spiritual state will reveal itself. And that will be crazy because people go, well, you don't know me. How do you describe this type of stuff about me? You've never met me before. Well, I'm not invested in it as if I want you to validate me. I'm just reading the information from your field. And that's the part that blows people away. But it's just a skill like anything. You master that skill. And, you know, what you're experiencing now is what most people call PK touch, psychokinesis, which is like it's not possible. People just use it as an illusion. They're like, oh, yeah, you know, maybe you see an illusionist, David Blaine, someone like that. They play tricks to get you to believe they're doing that. But we just experienced it. And the funny part is your audience, when they watch this back, can experience it themselves. And that's where a lot of my students love to watch interviews that I have, because their experience, there's a visceral, kinesthetic, somatic experience that they're having, and they're able to experience it now, which is another validation. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And in the beginning stage, these things can feel a bit overwhelming until you figure out a way to master your own energy and be more aware about all the, like sometimes the noise that goes on energetically when there are a lot of people in public. So yeah, like it's kind of a path you have to become more aware, where you don't feel confused about those energetic dynamics.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's an exciting thing. You know,
Yeah.
your lung channel is so clear. That's why you're able to be very, very in tune with the energetic potential. So whenever your channels present themselves, they need to, for someone to be energetically sensitive, they must have a very clear lung channel. And so that it shows you how sensitive you are. And so, you know, most people tend to mask that. They realize they have this and they get overwhelmed, just as you spoke of. And so they'll go and do things to
Shut it off.
shut it off, whether it's smoking, drinking, whatever, anything to distract them from the fact that it's happening, because it's too much. And that's the part where I want people to get excited about the potential, and then find their path, find their method. Don't leave it astray. I get a dozen people a day that come to me that have Kundalini awakenings, they call it, and they're left absent of any knowing and any pathway. They just get confused because they don't have any answers, and they don't know how to find the answers. They just know they're extremely energetically sensitive, and it's difficult for them to contend with their everyday life. And what happens to them mentally and emotionally, it becomes clear, it's overwhelming. And it doesn't have to be. I want people to understand that once you realize you're experiencing this, now find the path to get clearer information so you know what you're doing.
Yeah, I'm at the cusp of doing that to get clarity rather than feeling confused by all these different types of information coming in your field, to kind of like grow bigger in your awareness, to provide space for that information to come in, and not, because sometimes like you're trying to personalize that information, and it's not personal, it's just information.
That's the key, is not to personalize it. And when you realize, and so whenever I do a reading on someone, I always start at the bottom. So when you're looking at energy centers, there's 9 energy centers in the body for a Taoist.
for someone who's dressing it as a chakra, there'd be 7 chakras and 2 transpersonal points. And so you start with the earth energy, and then you move to the root chakra. And then I get a very clear understanding of where that person is and their own parameters, their boundary setting, and things of that nature as to whether they want to hear any more information or not. Because people can get really slapped in the face if you share something about them that they don't want anyone to know. It's like, yeah, whoa. And so you always start with the parameters, because the individual's boundary setting gives you a clear indication. And that way, I want to share, I don't want to share. And you always leave it there. But by the time, I'll always ask someone if I'm in a group setting of friends and they're like, oh yeah, give me a reading. Okay, give me a reading, magic man. And then by the time you get to the sexual energy, they're like, oh, whoa. I don't want you. We're good. And then they look at me and go, this is real. This is real. Yes, it is real, but I'm just reading off a menu. Just as Suma said, it's like becoming, not distorting the information for your own benefit. You realize it is what it is, and not, attempting to craft it to something that's a little bit more distorted. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And I feel like in my case, like I feel like I'm experiencing that kind of growth in 2 directions, where I'm okay with someone reading my energy, like and that comes with like being more and more comfortable with your energy and not feeling the need to judge your own energy. Then you're not that worried about what someone else is going to read about your energy.
Right.
You have that okayness with whatever is going on in your field, and then you are able to provide that space for even create that space for bigger awareness and expand more and provide that space for that information to flow through and hold that non-judgmental space.
Yeah. I mean, it does. It becomes very personal, and people get a little, they get a little too. You got to remember, you are me, I am you. When you really understand that, there is no separation. So when people get caught up in protection instead of getting an energetic flow, the Wu Wei surpasses any fundamental constructs of protection that you might need energetically. Because once you raise your resonance, there's nothing that can hold a candle to that resonance. So no matter what you may present itself as a low frequency, will not sustain itself in that resonance. So the need for protection becomes zero, becomes null and void, because you realize that you're walking that, you're admitting that, your admission, you're that present moment, and it will always find you in synchronicity, serendipity, all these sort of things that will keep validating. And if you want more of the same, then you're going to receive it. Meaning, you stay in bliss, joy, and happiness, selflessness, servitude, then that's what it will continue to find you. And it will continue to expand and expand and expand and expand. And everyone around you will experience this. And they'll be like, oh my goodness, I'm just so grateful that you're here. That's part of it, is helping them remember who they are. And that is the real, it makes you whole. In some ways, from a humanistic perspective, there's a great deal of satisfaction in servitude, but you must realize the servitude is not manufactured. You will not have to contemplate. You will not have to think about it. You'll know when you're there. Because if you're thinking about it, you're using a manipulative way to control the situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I really resonate with that. It should not feel forced. It should be your natural being.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it really, when you get there, it's life is charm. People ask me, well, how are you doing today? What's going on? It's good to be me. I don't know what to tell you, because you get to experience this, and you're the now moment.
and all of a sudden all this other stuff becomes irrelevant. It doesn't have any measured value. You're seeking for something that you have already disappears. You're not in lack of anymore. You're just there. You're just now.
Thank you so much for these beautiful insights, San. I fully enjoyed this conversation, and I would love to do a deeper dive in some of these ideas.
Yeah, I would love that.
Yeah, hopefully this will be a continued. I would love to see a continued collaboration, and
yes, I would love to have you on my channel. We can go into conversation also. I would love that.
Thank you. Yeah. I would love to stay in touch with you.
Yes, that would be perfect. So I'll set this up and give you some dates, and when you think you might be available, we can continue it on my channel, and we can go back and forth a couple of times. So.
Absolutely, I would love that, and I would love to, with the audience, to learn more about energetic transformation, and because there is I feel like we just touched the surface level today, and we can do a deeper dive in more conversation.
Yeah, I would love that. Yeah, perfect.
Thank you.
This has been fantastic. Yes, thank you so much. I really, really welcomed, and I'm very grateful to have this conversation today.